All right, this is a formative quiz answer video for your quiz that you did yesterday on integer multiplication. This is grade 8 and it's September 2020. The first question we had was a true false, actually the first four questions we had. It says negative 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. Now the answer, of course, for this is false, and there are various ways you could prove that it's false. You could have modeled it, but the easiest way would have been sign rules. And they say if there's same signs, like a negative times a negative or a positive times a positive, you should have a positive product. Okay? You could have also modeled it by saying removing four groups of negative 3 would be a positive 12, something like this. And if you removed four groups of negative 3, there's one group of negative 3, there's two groups of negative 3, there's three groups of negative 3. Removing four groups of negative 3, what remains is positive 12. Question 2 in our true false says this picture models the equation negative 2 times negative 3 equals positive 6. Well, the answer for this is true because if we interpret what this says removing two groups, which we are doing. Right here, this here is removing one group and another group. And then, of course, multiplication is of. And then we have removing two groups of negative 3, and what remains is positive 6. The third question is division. I don't know why that ended up here. It shouldn't be here, but anyway. We'll do it anyway. No, we won't. We'll skip it. My mistake. Question 4 says the word of can be interpreted as multiplication, and the word and can mean addition. This is true, right? Of is always able to be interpreted as the word as multiplication. And if you see the word and, so for example, 4 and 3 put together make 7, and four groups of 3 make 12. And question 5 is now not true and false anymore. It's what are your sign rules in 10 words or less? Well, I like to say same signs. Just 1 second here. Let me just erase that. So the easiest way is same signs equals a positive product, and different signs equals a negative product. Remember, product is just a fancy word for the answer to a multiplication. All right. Question 6 is model using integer chips. So the first one says adding four groups. If I interpret it, adding four groups of negative 2. So there's a group of negative 2, and if I put a circle around it and bring it in, that's adding one group of negative 2. And if I take that, and I'm going to just infinite clone that, I'm going to group it, and then infinite clone it, and then I have adding two groups of negative 2, adding three groups of negative 2, adding four groups of negative 2 is what that would be. And of course, when we look at that, 4 times negative 2 would be negative 8. In the second example, it says negative 4 times 1, which is removing four groups of 1. So because in the first picture we started with nothing and added groups, because we're going to be removing groups, we're going to start with nothing that is made up of something. We're going to make infinite cloner here. And I'm just going to make enough for 4. And when I reinterpret removing four groups of positive 1, that's removing one group, removing two groups, removing three groups, and removing four groups of positive 1. And when we remove four groups of positive 1 from nothing, we end up with negative 4 remaining. And finally, your last one says removing three groups of negative 1, which basically is the same picture as the one above it. So I'm going to make my 0. I'm just going to do it like this. I don't need to make infinite cloners. That is nothing. And if I remove three groups of negative 1, that's one group. That's two groups. That's three groups of negative 1. I end up with 3. Question 7 says model using number lines. So we have adding three groups of negative 3. So I'm going to make this 0. And this, of course, will be 1, 2, 3, etc., etc. Don't bother labeling, but you get the idea. So if this is 0 here, adding one group of oh, that's not right. How can I do that? Oopsie daisy. If I'm adding three groups of negative 3, I got to start over here. So 0 has to go over here. Negative 1, 2, 3. There's one group of negative 3. 1, 2, 3. There's two groups of negative 3. And 1, 2, 3. There's three groups of negative 3, and I end up at negative 9. So we're adding three groups of negative 3 together. Each one of these is a negative 3. If you wanted to, you could go 1, 2, 3, either way. and you end up with -9. In B, it says 4 groups of +2, so this time I'm going to use it here. So 1 group of +2, 2 groups of +2, 3 groups of +2, 4 groups of +2, or 1, 2, 3, 4. Where do I end up at? I end up at a +8. Question 8 says, interpret and write as an equation of multiplication, adding 3 groups of -7. We want to make an equation here, so adding 3 groups of -7. What is the product of those two? Well, 3 times 7 is 21, and different signs using my sign rules would be a -21. Removing 2 groups of -1 is 2 times 1 is 2, and same signs is positive, so our answer would be +2. And here we are adding together 5 groups, adding together 5 groups of -1, and what's the sum of those? The answer would be -5. Question 9 says use sign rules to find the products. That was easy. Same signs positive, different signs negative. So 4 times 6 is 24. Different signs, meaning a positive and a negative. It's a -24. 5 times 1 is 5. Same signs. It's a positive answer. 2 times 9 is 18. And the tricky one is because it's a negative times a negative, those are the same signs, which is a positive 18. And your last one's a little tricky. -1 times -5. So -1 times -5, if I do that first, is going to be a +5. And +5 times a -2. 2 times 5 is 10. Opposite signs is -10. And your last two questions are story problems. The first one says, a plane starts at an altitude of 1,250 meters. So I'm going to just draw a plane. That's the world's best plane. And from the ground, it is 1,250 meters above ground. It descends at a rate of 25 meters per second for 6 seconds. Okay? What is an expression that represents the new height of the plane? What is this new height? So what we're really going to do is we're going to start with our original height, or our starting height. Starting height. And what we're going to do is we're going to add to it our descending. My God, my handwriting or my spelling is terrible. That's going to equal my new height. So if I think about starting height, and we know that to be 1,250 meters, plus we're going to add to that the descending height. So if I want to use brackets, you can use brackets if you want. You don't have to because it's multiplication. But it's 6 seconds of descending 25 meters. Right? 6 groups of descending 25 meters. Now, if you didn't have those brackets there, it would still work out okay, right? So 6 groups of each second is going to be descending 25 meters, right? So if we follow bed mass, we're going to say, well, 1,250 meters plus, what is 6 times 25? Well, 4 times 25 is 100. So 6 times 25 is 150. But since it's a +6 times a -25, it's going to be a negative. So if we think about that, it went down right here. This distance here goes down 150 meters, which is our -150. And if we combine the starting height with the change in altitude, we have a final height of 1,100 meters. And that's our answer. Therefore, 1,100 meters is the new height. Is the new height. Question 11 says, Will owned shares in Amazon stock. In week 1, the value of the stock decreased by $2 a share. And in week 2, the value of the stock rose $5 per share. What is an integer expression that represents the week 1 change? So if we have 25 groups or 25 shares, and each one of them decreased by $2, that's going to be a -$2 representation. So each of those 25 shares decreased by $2, and that means the overall net loss in week 1 is I lost $50 in stock value in week 1. In week 2, those same 25 shares rose $5. So we're going to multiply that by the $5 gain per share. And that means our gain is going to be a positive $125 because 25 times 5 is 125. And how much profits or loss did they make? Well, if you take the week 1, and I'm just going to write it. Actually, you know what? Let's write it in words first. Week 1 plus week 2 will equal the overall change, right? So we take week 1 as being negative 50, and we combine that with week 2, which is 125, or a positive 125. What do we have more of, positive, negative? Do we have more positive? How many more? 75. So therefore, $75, a positive $75 gain. Actually, we don't need the positive symbol because we use the word gain. $75 gain over 2 weeks. And that's the answer to your little formative quiz.